when you talk about cell phone, that's almost like that's an option. I mean, there are people, but I understand.
Is that an option for you in your life, Harry?
What I'm talking about is a I'm special, so of course,
right.
course.
I have a podcast.
Not one other kid in this neighborhood does chores. You're gonna get in trouble, Murtaugh.
Hey, Mom! Can we get some meatloaf?
He started it.
Mom!
What?
Shut up!
What is the matter with you?
I know it's a school night, so we're just gonna get right down to it.
Good afternoon. Well, this is Harry Harrison, Harry H. Harrison Jr. to be specific if you're looking for my books. And I want to welcome you to another exciting episode of Fearless Parenting. And today we have a really terrific guest, Ms. Leigh Richardson of Brain Performance Center. She is the topic's going to be about teenage cell phone addiction, and this is something that I've talked about and written about, and now we actually have an expert in the house to talk about it. So, Leigh, welcome.
Thank you.
Also with us is our trusty, godless, childless,
Producer,
marriageless, brideless, Zach.
Hi, Harry.
Hi, Zach. Good seeing you.
Can we call him homeless? He doesn't. I don't think he has a home.
I have a home. Come on now.
It just keeps growing.
It's an apartment, right?
To be fair, I am always here.
The indignities just keep growing.
It just gets sadder and sadder. There'll be nothing left to be.
But we could not do this show without Zach. So
no, thank you, Harry.
It's an imperative. Okay.
Okay.
So, teenage cell phone addiction. I've actually spoken this week a couple times to radio stations about some of the challenges that teenagers participate in with their smartphone, like the Blue Whale Challenge, where kids will enlist to do anything a quote controller tells them to do, including killing themselves if that's the final edict, or the green pepper challenge where you eat all the peppers you can. The whole point is to record it and share it and get friends. But what we're talking about today, my belief is that the smartphone should not be put in the hands of anybody under 15.
I agree with that. I think that there's a responsibility that comes with owning a smartphone. And a lot of times it's given as a necessity. You know, you got to have a phone. I'm a single mom. I'm not a single mom, but if I were, and I need a way to get in touch with you, and I need a backup contact system, I need that phone. You know, those phones have become a lifeline. You can turn your homework in over your cell phone. You can check and see what your grades are over your cell phone.
They're incredibly versatile tools.
They are.
Yeah.
They're miracles.
True.
And there was an article about 3 weeks ago about how screen time for kids has it's now like 4 to 5 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And they're calling it anything like a phone or an iPad or a computer a screen, but how it's replaced television for a lot of parents as a way to babysit. So I have a 4-year-old grandson, and he knows the ins and outs of the iPad and cell phone. It's extraordinary.
Well, you know, it's probably the best babysitter around, because picking that up, that iPad or that cell phone, manipulating and seeing what you want to see, that produces pleasure. That's a pleasurable activity. That pleasure, the brain works off the pleasure principle. Doesn't matter what it is. Maybe for you, it's a glass of wine at the end of the day, or for some lady over there, it's shopping or gambling. All of that produces pleasure in the brain, just like a cell phone does for, you know, a teenager. You post something. Oh, did anybody like my, how many likes did I get?
Sure.
On an average, teens respond 78% of the time immediately to a text that they get.
Okay, so somebody sends them a text or requesting a like or requests, look at this, and 78% of kids
they
will
will respond immediately. On the average, the average person will check their cell phone like 110 times a day. Someone that's addicted will check that phone 900 times a day.
Just to be clear, 110 times a day is not an addiction.
No. You're safe, Harry. Don't worry. It's all good.
That's a Tuesday.
Right.
But that sounds alarming just when you say it out loud like that 101 times and then 900 times. That's incredible.
It is incredible, but
That's most of the day.
Right.
think about the teenage brain. You know, the brain's not fully developed until you're
And
in
I've
your
always referred to the teenage brain as a piece of cabbage that you can't argue with it. You can't make logic with it. You can't rationalize with it. You can just experience it.
And that you do.
Yeah.
No,
I can get into that.
that
Why
you
not?
do. But that brain's not fully developed until you're in your late 20s, you know, mid to late 20s. So as a teenager, the prefrontal cortex, that's a part of the brain where impulsivity comes from, that's hardly developed. So you're so vulnerable in those teenage years. Oh my gosh, I've got to have that. I've got to check that. I haven't
Sure.
checked it enough.
Well, social media, I think, is a whole other realm to get into, and of course, a smartphone is a portal to that. I think the advantage of social media on a smartphone is the idea that you can produce content and just throw it into the void, and that it'll matter. That somebody out there will see it and go, "Oh, that's cool," and you're cool for it. It's social. What do you call it?
So you get the ooh willies when somebody likes something you posted.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not about talking. Talking didn't really have much to do with the way teenagers use their cell phone.
Right.
It's about the texting, the immediacy. Oh, I got that right back.
Right.
So let's back it up a little bit. So before they're teenagers, they're kids. And
They're adolescents.
they're adolescents, and then how in your experience, how young are kids that parents are giving cell phones and iPads to?
Well, my experience is this. Parents will come into my clinic, and they'll come for a consultation about an older child. And in order to talk, they'll give the 4-year-old their phone. That 4-year-old can whip it out, turn it on, go amazing places. You know, maybe they're watching a movie for a little while, then they'll flip over and they'll go to YouTube. And I'm like, wow, how'd you do that? You know, that at a very early age, and it starts before the cell phone. I think it starts with the iPad. Hey, I want you to learn your alphabet. I want you to learn your numbers. There's this great game you can play on the iPad.
So just so our listeners understand your background, the Brain Performance Center deals with and helps kids with ADD, ADHD,
Anxiety, depression, OCD, and a lot of addiction stems from OCD.
Okay, so you see this every day.
I do.
Addiction and alcohol addiction or whatever.
Well, you know, that's really the old addiction. It was the alcohol and the drugs. The new addiction is the pleasurable activities, whether it's gambling, shopping, online, cell phone addiction, iPad. But all of that produces pleasure. And man, the brain perceives pleasure all the same way. It gives you, boom, this big hit of dopamine, this neurotransmitter, and it feels good.
So you see this every day. What do you think it is about going back to kids? What draws them into the cell phone or the iPad? Well, first off, why would parents give a 4-year-old an iPad?
I think that's a real good question. But a lot of times it's out of necessity. Like in my office, the parent really wants to be able to focus and ask good questions and learn how we can help the 7-year-old. So it's a necessity. And it's an alternative instead of dropping the kid off at a babysitter. I think a lot of parents depend on it kind of as a resource. And I think when used in the right way, it is a resource. It's just, where do you go over that fine line where I really like this, I need this, I want this.
Well, it's a convenience. It's the get-rich-quick scheme of parenting. You don't have to drive them to a babysitter. Just hand them this.
hand them a
Yeah, like
phone.
it's way easier.
So okay, the motives are good. I need my child to be quiet for a while.
And I want my child to learn their alphabet.
Oh,
I mean,
sure. Yeah,
sure.
who doesn't want
I can
that?
download an app and teach them the alphabet or teach them Spanish or on this phone, on this iPad that makes everything colorful and fun.
and it doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
Right.
So where does it start becoming a problem? At what age and how? What are the actions that turn it into
Well, I don't think there's
problem?
any special age that it becomes a problem, but there's some warning signs that you can look for. When you try to take that phone away from that child and they have a total meltdown, that's a problem.
You're taking away their drug.
Yeah, you are. When they almost, that's a good point, they almost go into a drug-like withdrawal. Oh my gosh, they have a total meltdown.
Right.
You know, when they are sleep deprived, when they're staying up all night long on their cell phone, and 61% of students report that being on their cell phone, being sleep deprived, impacts their ability to perform at school. That's a problem. You know, sometimes we're so busy on our phone that we can't take time to stop and eat, or what we eat, we just grab what's fast and easy to eat. So you may see weight changes. The weight may go up, may go down. There's different changes in behavior, changes in the way they operate. When you're seeing that, that's something to be concerned about. And when you take away a phone, and if you notice a child gets very anxious, or they socially isolate because they don't have their phone, that's who they are. That's their sense of identity.
Right. Children's brains are minds for molding. They're smaller versions of ours, and they're very much simpler, but a lot of functions, I think, are the same, except we've grown up to understand these things. It's funny, not that long ago, I ended up at the Apple store, and I had to take in my iPhone to get something fixed, and so they took my iPhone, and they were like, if you're just going to hang out here for a couple minutes, like, it'll be cool. So, all right, cool. Takes my iPhone, goes in the back. I reach for my pocket to reach for my phone. And I was like, oh, I didn't have it. And then just kind of stood there awkwardly because I didn't know what to do. Yeah, I was like, what do I do now? Do I just stand here and wait, or do I go find something?
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Where is your iPhone when you're sleeping?
On the nightstand next to me.
Is that a good place for it?
Probably not.
No.
No. Oh, gosh, yeah, the other night I had a migraine, and it's like, don't look at your phone, you have a migraine. But I was bored and couldn't sleep, so I looked at my phone.
And that's one of the first recommendations I make is do not leave that phone in the room.
It's smart. Yeah.
77% of teenagers text and tweet while they're in bed.
Yeah.
And if you don't, and it's so hard if it's just sitting right there looking at you.
It's true.
So you're talking about parental behavior, which is kind of what we're focused on the show, is the ramifications of being a good parent or letting that responsibility go and hand it to a phone.
Well, you know, I think that role model behavior is one of the hardest things to do with the cell phone. You know, I work with a lot of families that say, we cannot sit down at dinner. Everybody is on their phone. So put a basket on the kitchen counter and ask everybody to put their phone in the basket until you have dinner, you do your homework, then you have 30 minutes of cell phone before you go to bed. But one of my recommendations is a central charging station. You know, you want to see somebody that's addicted, take away that battery charger.
Ooh.
That's a good one. In fact, I definitely have one of these portable power packs.
Oh, I like that.
Just to keep me going on the
Right.
street. Yeah, if I'm running out of juice and I'm jonesing for a little extra something.
And you can justify that because you need that for work.
Hey, I'm a professional.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Listen, I would not be able to make
Talking
it
on
by.
the phone is my business.
Yeah, we make podcasts. This is my whole life. Is phone.
Is that screen? You know what's so interestingly is that you could the withdrawal symptoms you're talking about. You could take the word phone out of it. You can put in cocaine. You could put in shopping. You could put in
You
sex.
could put in anything.
Well, it's like you said earlier. Addiction is fueled by pleasure. It's by dopamine. That's every addiction. It's alcohol, drugs, smartphones. It's kind of the same in a way.
Addiction is a chronic brain disease. It's not just about, say no, get some willpower.
Right.
Addiction changes the brain structure and how the brain functions. It is a chronic brain disease.
You know what's weird is that alcoholism, drug addiction, the typical things we associate with addiction, you're kind of born with a predilection for that.
You make an excellent point. Brain waves are just as genetic as the color of eyes you have or what size shoe you wear. So, and they've got a lot of research around alcohol that supports genetically. You've got it in your genetics, but that applies to everything.
But when you talk about cell phone, that's almost like that's an option. I mean, there are people, but I understand.
Is that an option for you in your life, Harry?
What I'm talking about is I'm special, so of course,
Right.
course,
I have a podcast.
but I'm talking about some people. They taste alcohol. It's in their family.
Mm-hmm.
They're over
gone.
one and done.
They're gone.
Same thing with a drug. If drug addiction is their family, one and done. But the cell phone is so interesting because it's like, okay, you have a predilection for addiction. And if there's not alcohol around, and there's not cocaine around, is the phone a substitute?
Let's stop and think about this. We know that when the brain gets pleasure, it releases dopamine.
Okay.
Dopamine impacts how you learn and your memory. And those are two key elements of the transition from liking something to must having something. So it's a process. That's a chemical, but it's not just about, what's in the alcohol. It's about what's going on in the brain. So whether it's alcohol or a cell phone or sex or gambling, the same thing occurs in the brain. The brain has the pleasure principle.
Right. There can be physical withdrawal symptoms to something like a physical substance you're intaking, but the reason we like those things, it's because of how our brain reacts to that substance. The way our brain perceives alcohol and we feel it is why we like the feeling of it, the buzz, as it were. Smartphones are the same thing. You're just not inputting anything physical, but it's still a mental function.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's the way your brain perceives that information and processes it. That's what you like.
It's the
what
reward.
makes
That's what keeps you coming back.
What makes it so unusual is that if you're a drug addict, you don't take the drug after you've crossed the Rubicon. You don't take the drug to get
Hopefully.
high. You take the drug to be normal.
Right.
Because you'll go into withdrawal, you
stuck,
start
yeah.
shaking.
Because you need it. The
Right.
reward system in your brain says you need that. You need that.
You need that drug to act normal. Cell phone. How do you withdraw from a cell phone? I mean, there's all
Is there
these
a good way to come down from that high?
Well, I think, there was an article that was in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the shareholders were suggesting that Apple step up and put some guidelines in place. And in your home, you need to establish some strategies and what some boundaries are.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to be addicted. I can check my schedule on my phone. I can check my email. I can do everything. I can talk with both of my boys one's in Denver, one's in Florida. That's my lifeline. But at the end of the day, I plug it in on the charger in the kitchen, and I go to bed. And that's just creating some boundaries. And you have to have strategies in place.
It's interesting to see how our world has kind of adapted to this. I had a conversation with a friend the other day about the difference between a salaried employee now and a salaried employee 30 years ago. Back then, it was the same kind of deal. You were expected to work whenever. A 40-hour work week was standard, but you had a little extra outside of that. But at 5 o'clock, you went home, and that was that. Now, at 5 o'clock, your day is not over. If you get an email at 6 o'clock, you should probably answer it. Like, you're still responsible for things, and cell phones keep us tied down in maybe not a beneficial way. So, yeah.
I remember when my kids were growing up, and the principal said, because they were playing soccer, they were playing sports, there was a possibility of going to the band, and a very wise principal said, well, I always tell parents that there should be no more than 2 activities a day, because homework is an activity, so that's 3. Eating's an activity, that's 4. So she said kids can handle 4 activities outside of school. One is eating, one is studying, so that leaves you 2. So now it appears cell phone is an activity. Just as much as sports. Instead of going off to soccer practice for 2 hours, kids are popping up with the cell phone.
And I think maybe sometimes that cell phone usage gets in the way. I don't have time to go to soccer practice. I posted 3 things on my social media. I got to see who likes it. I got to see how, that's my self-confidence. That's my self-esteem. Not going and getting the play of the game so much anymore. Now, not everybody's like that.
Sure. But there is. But it's an issue.
But it is.
What do you tell parents to? Okay, first off, what age would you put a smartphone in the hands of a child?
I would probably, in my world, it would be a teenager. Okay. You do not get a phone until you're a teenager. And then it starts with limited usage. You use it when I need you to have that. So I'm dropping you off at soccer. If you get out early, you call me. You use it based upon what my needs and wants are. And then you progress. And you teach. I think you need to teach that child how to use the phone. This is what it's for. It's like anything. You can have 30 minutes where you do whatever you want on the phone. You can have, and then you can do your schoolwork, and then the phone goes up. And we need those boundaries. And I think, it's amazing to me. You mentioned how the world is changing with the job. We know what the latest MBAs are. Corporate social responsibility.
Awesome.
There's
Yeah.
something there.
Awesome.
There is something there.
So I can see the danger in someone becoming isolated with that phone, and like you said, staying in the bedroom. This has become not only their lifeline; it's become their thing, and when you start isolating yourself in a room, talking to or texting or judging videos of another teen, I don't know, 1,500 miles away. There's not a lot of really true social interaction.
I think you hit right on it, Harry. The biggest concern that I have with cell phones is you get disconnected. And people that demonstrate they're highly addictive to cell phones and internet time, they score much higher on depression and anxiety.
Why do you think that is?
Can I throw my hat in the ring on this one? I have a theory,
Sure.
and it's kind of a lame theory, but hear me out. I think the internet, it's a series of tubes, but the internet is essentially, let's look at something like YouTube. They have hundreds of hours of video uploaded to YouTube every minute, more than you could ever possibly watch. It's insane how much goes on YouTube, and what rises to the top, what we see are videos that are viral, usually things that are cool, things that are funny, things that are extreme, things we don't see every day in our lives. Somebody doing a cool trick on a bike, a stand-up comedian with a really good bit.
The brain loves novelty.
Right, and we see the best of the best. That's what the internet is. It is a stage where we see the best. So when you look at your own life and you're not doing incredible things like we were constantly exposed to on the internet, it brings you down a little. You're like, well, I'm not as good as any of these people. This person from Kansas with a beautiful singing voice, I could never do that. It's a constant influx of essentially negative information by looking at it in a positive lens.
I think that is so true, and I think that when you get into gunning for likes and
Oh, sure.
shooting for friends, it's inevitable there's going to be comparison. It's just inevitable that, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
And when you compare, somebody wins and somebody loses.
Right. So you're exactly, and now you're at a stage where you're comparing yourself to other people you don't know that are way away, and they have more likes than you.
Right.
And if that's what if you live for that buzz, but it's so weird. It's not just the buzz of getting a like. Now it's important to get the most likes because
That means you're the best.
right.
Sure.
And we all want to be the best.
Yeah.
I do.
Sure. But if inevitably someone's going to get 10,000 likes and you may get 4, if that's your whole goal in life is to get likes.
Mm-hmm.
So how connected is that to reality? Let's stop and think about that. You know, if you're living your life through the likes that you get on your phone, how connected are you to your life? Those people that are liking you, have you ever met them?
Right. They know nothing about
They
you.
know nothing about
Would you know them if
Right.
they came in and sat down next to you?
Right.
And the other problem is everybody goes through difficult times, and that's where you need friends.
Real friends.
Actual people.
Friends that talk and that will pat you on
Sure.
the back, Harry. and
Yeah.
Those type of friends.
That's where you need friends. But if you don't know anybody except through social media, depression ensues.
Right. It's something that we find in a lot of performers, actually. You can look at somebody like Robin Williams as a fine example of this. Like, all the world's a stage, and we want to impress the people around us. That is culture, inherently. We want to be better than the people we surround ourselves with. Sometimes people who are even very popular, make millions of dollars, have thousands of people that look at them and look up to them. Like, they're some of the saddest. Because, like, what's it all for at the end of the day? Where does it get you? It's all surface. None of it's real. None of it actually matters, regardless of how you try to convince yourself otherwise.
And you were talking about modeling behavior. So many parents, and I'm going to say moms, so many moms are on that phone all day, on Facebook, snapping, posting, judging. That's what they're teaching their kids.
Well, I got to tell you, I was out walking the dog yesterday afternoon. I see a mom. She's on her cell phone just chatting away, walking ahead. One kid, the older kid, is behind her pushing the baby in the carriage. I thought,
I'm going
What's
to take
up
a
with
picture of that
that?
and post it.
No, actually, I didn't think it was picture worthy.
Well, Harry, this is an interesting thing about that point of modeling behavior is that when you were raising your kids, you didn't have a cell phone.
Right.
So they weren't watching you grow up with one. I mean, maybe if you were raising children now, it might be a different story because you're on your iPad and cell phone a lot. But you didn't have one, so your children didn't see that modeled behavior. But now your children have children, and we grow up in a world of cell phones. And so I guess, Leigh, is there something that we can do? Because, I mean, the cell phone is a part of life. It's not something that we're going to get rid of.
No.
Like, that's not... that's not a realistic option, is to just say, well, just get rid of your phone. So what can we do, or how can we be more cognizant of modeling our behavior? I have a young boy, and he sees me use my phone. And so, what strategies or tips do you have in that respect?
I think from a strategy standpoint, you have to determine what's an acceptable level. You have to look, how much data do you use? Have an open conversation with your family. Who uses the most data? And how much are you using, and when are you using it? And is it interfering with your sleep? Are you isolating? You won't go to family events because you'd rather sit in your room and play with your phone? Use your observation skills. I think, to me, and I could give you statistic after statistic, 44% of teens believe they spend too much time on their cell phones. 50% of teens believe they're addicted. 59% of their parents do.
50% believe they're addicted?
Uh-huh. And 59% of their parents do. So those stats are pretty powerful. But what's more powerful for me, it's the walking zombies. They're everywhere. They're walking around looking at their phone.
Yeah, I definitely had a guy, total stranger, hold the elevator for me for an absurd amount of time the other day because I was just walking around looking at my phone, texting. I looked up and saw him. I was like, oh, my God, I'm so sorry, sir.
There's a walking zombie there in the room.
Then there's the driving zombies, which one of them has hit me.
Those are frightening.
Well, let me tell you the statistic, and this brings tears to my eyes. 11 teens die every day because they were texting while driving.
11 a day?
11
Write that down.
a day.
That is a startling statistic.
it is.
When we talk about, you mentioned earlier the idea of people talking to Apple and saying maybe there's a way you can kind of curve this. I know in one of their more recent updates they put in some kind of function where it essentially lock your phone when your car is moving past driving speed. Mm-hmm. Smart.
Who's going to download that, though?
Yeah, I know. Who's going to want that
That's not
on?
gonna happen.
Come
Well,
on.
if you're on my family plan, it'll be on there.
Definitely. If you're in Texas, like we are recording this, we have laws now that say you can't use your phone when you drive. People do it anyway, but you shouldn't. So we're trying. I think societally, we're trying to do something to curb this. I just don't know if it's enough.
So the issue is not, is the cell phone bad or good? It's a thing.
A cell phone's great.
It's a neutral thing. It can be.
I think mine's great.
Well, I mean, it can be. You can't judge a cell phone on moral values.
No.
It's just a thing, and it can be used. It can be used wisely, or it can be used terribly. And as parents, and I love what you said about boundaries, and I think a parent should make it clear, I own that phone. Mm-hmm. That phone is mine. You're borrowing it. That phone is mine.
Yeah.
And
when you start paying for it, then it's yours.
Exactly.
That's always been the line in my house.
Yeah,
Right.
that was my dad growing up. Yeah,
But
You're dating me.
If I'm paying for that phone, that phone is mine. And at any time, I can walk over and pick that phone up out of your hands. I can go back through your text messages. I can see what you're posting on Facebook. I can look at what you're doing on Instagram.
Sure.
I can see why in the world are you on Snapchat. And if I don't like what I see, that phone goes in the river.
Oh, absolutely. I am Prometheus. I'm giving you fire, but I will take it back.
Right.
This is, yeah.
I can drown it out.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a
and
temporary
I think
thing.
one good rule to have is one day a week we're tech free. One day a week we do not touch the phone.
Sure.
And not just that teenager, everybody in the family. Let's leave the phones at home. Let's go everybody gets to pick something one week. Okay, you're up. What do you want to do this week?
I like that. Even God took a break. All right,
Yeah.
one day out of the
Yeah.
week. Yeah.
So I love that. And I guess you'll be able to tell if your daughter starts shaking and dribbling, throwing up, and
That's right. Yeah.
having signs of
withdrawal symptoms.
Or she refuses to go. I'm not going. That doesn't sound like fun to me.
How are we on time?
I was going to say, we only got a couple minutes left, but I'm
Okay.
really enjoying the conversation.
how many photos do you think a teen posts every day?
That's a really good question.
On average? I bet somebody like Google's got those numbers, right? They got
I bet it's maybe a lot.
Do you think?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking it's over 100.
A day?
Yeah.
Oh, that can't be. Well,
easily.
Well, that would make
if you count
a great
go ahead.
next
I would
show.
say it depends on the team.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say if you count video as frames in film,
No,
then
I
that
think
would count easy.
I think the younger, and I'm including you in this, all 28 years.
A little bit higher than that, but I'll take it.
20 that they take an extraordinarily number of photos every day and post it.
Sure.
And that's a way that they share. This is who I am. This is what I like to do.
Right. It's an
true.
artificial reinforcement. It feels like it matters.
Well,
these things I do matter to somebody.
I mean, and it's an argument that it's an avenue of self-expression, the same way that you would maybe paint a painting. You're sharing photos of your life. That's how people are getting to know more about you.
And I think the
Absolutely.
danger in that is it goes right back to what you were talking about, comparison. That I'm going to show myself my best light, my hair made up, everything. I'm going to pick the corner of my room that looks the best.
Yeah.
But then I'm going to go on social media and see Leigh's photos and see, oh my gosh. And you're just opening the door to comparison, to feeling less than, to feeling like you're nothing because someone else has a better picture, a better room, a better car.
Sure.
And I think to a great extent sometimes people use social media as a way to feel better, as a way to tell the world I'm better than you are.
Of
Well, you can
course.
validate yourself on social media.
Yes. It's
Look at
self-validation.
me. Look what I did. Look, I did this swim meet. I was the top #1. That's the way you validate who you are and what you do.
But we don't go around talking like that. We post it, we text it, but we don't go around, unless you're me, talk about how great you are. We just don't go. We say things, we text things and type things and post things we would never
Without
say.
thinking.
We'll need
That's
to-
because we don't think about it.
We'll need
Right.
to do another episode at some point on the difference between your actual life and your life online.
It's-
Because exactly, I mean, you just tapped into it. You're like people buying lights and setting themselves up in a corner of the room to look the best and posing a certain way. It's all fake. None of that's real.
Right.
Yeah, and like
Right.
we try to make it look real. That's a whole other show.
It
We
is.
don't have time for that.
No.
But yeah,
This
yes,
is
it's been great.
this is Zach's way of saying we're out of time.
We're out of time. Lee should come back. Yeah, like
Thank
Lee
you
should-
so
this
much
has
for having
been
me.
awesome. There's so much information we haven't even talked about, but having a brain expert on the show. Okay, so today's episode, curiously enough, is brought to you by one of my favorite books of mine, 1001 Things Every Teen Should Know Before They Leave Home, or else they'll come back. And the purpose of our show and the purpose of what I do is to help parents raise kids to face the adult world. And obviously, if you're spending 4 hours a day on your cell phone, you're not ready.
Let me
Not
just
quite
share
there yet.
Not
one
ready.
last fact with you. A couple of years ago, Baylor University did a study to see how much time college kids were spending on their phone. Females were spending 10 hours a day. Male students were spending 8 hours a day. So on the average, 9. When do you study?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we can assume they're reading their textbooks digitally.
Absolutely.
That's
It's all
of
on the cell
course.
phone.
I would like to choose to believe
I
that.
would love to choose to believe that.
So, Lee, thank you so much for coming. Zach, thank you so much for your stellar job. Kristen, thanks for jumping in. And this show will be posted Tuesday. It'll be posted Tuesday. So, thank you guys very much. We will talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Fearless Parenting is a production of the Real News Communications Network in collaboration with Harry H. Harrison Jr. This episode was recorded and edited by Matt Stoker and myself, Zach Lewis. Production music courtesy of the Audio Jungle Music Library. To find out more about Harry and his work, or to purchase one of his books, visit www.fearlessparenting.com.
listening to RMCN, the digital destination for premium talk radio.